today is Scott Pettit, an instructor from Davidson County Early College High School located in Thomasville, North Carolina. Scott is a national board certified teacher currently teaching high school math. This summer, he had the opportunity to travel with a group from the college to Villa Maria, located in Argentina, and observe several types of schools located in the region, as well as the use of technology in the community learning centers. Scott, thank you for joining us to share your observations from this trip. Many of us who have not traveled abroad may have some preconceived thoughts about South America. Let's start off with culture shock. What were your expectations before you left, and how did those change once you were on the ground in South America?
Okay. Um, I'm really not sure what my expectations were before I left. I, of course, went online and did some research about the country, the people of Argentina. Um, One thing that definitely was a culture shock to me when I got down there was um, how European it was. It is Argentina is not a country that people, at least around here, from the area I'm in, typically think of when they think of Latin American countries. It is a very European feel, a very European lifestyle, and of course, very European architecture because it's influenced heavily from the Spanish. Most people in Argentina actually trace their ancestry back to uh, Italy and Germany more than they do Spain and the Native Americans. Um, Probably my largest culture shock was uh, in the city of Villa Maria were the limited number of people who spoke English or even remotely understood English. It's a city of about 90,000 people with a national university, but being out and about in the town and the city itself, um, very few people spoke English. I speak very little Spanish, um, but it was a very immersive adventure that I truthfully enjoyed. But I think the lack of English was probably my largest culture shock while I was there.
Things that we take for granted here in the United States. Can you talk to us a little bit about the infrastructure in Villa Maria? Since infrastructure is so interwoven with technology, can you share a little bit about your observations from that perspective?
Um, Argentina is definitely a first world country. The infrastructure is very similar to ours. They're a very spread out country, a lot more so than I thought. But um, we flew into Cordoba, which is about an hour from Villa Maria, and we were met and taken by bus. Their highways are equivalent to our interstates. Speed limits are around 90 miles an hour, our equivalent out down there. Um, had no problems with running water or heat or anything like that. The two things that I did notice they had a little more trouble with than we do um, are their electric grid and their internet service. One of the first school we went to visit was El Caminante, which is a private school on the outskirts of Villa Maria, and on the day we were supposed to, or on the day we did visit, um, when we got there, they had actually lost power. And just in talking to the students and the faculty, they're not really rolling brownouts. They just apparently, um, oftentimes, power lines just go down and power just goes out um, in various places around the city. I obviously, when I was in the cities like Cordoba and Buenos Aires, I had no problems or noticed no issues with the electricity whatsoever. Um, Also, the internet. Um, I had consistent cell service while I was down there, so I was always able to use the cell internet. But some of the wired connections were not up to what we are used to here in the U.S. with some of our fiber and cable lines, which I found very interesting because despite the fact they're very European, their internet does not match up with our standards. And as you probably know, our standards are way behind most of Europe as far as their internet speeds and services that are available to them. But overall, the infrastructure was very similar to ours, just some things were a little less reliable than they are here in the States. But I'm sure you could go to areas here in the U.S. and find the exact same thing.
Visit a lot of different types of schools, Scott. Can you spend a few minutes and tell us about the different styles and types of schools that you got to visit?
So while we were down there, we were originally scheduled to visit three different schools. There was the El Caminante, excuse me, El Caminante, which is a private school, a farm school, and there was another school that we were supposed to visit while we were there, and now I cannot think of it to save my life. It was one of the public schools, but the funny thing was, is once we got down there and when we went to the university, the campus, university's campus, just in talking with what I do with our hosts, they said, "Oh, well, that's interesting. We've just recently started a high school here on the college campus," and so I'm thinking, "Wow, what a great opportunity!" So, kind of to cover what we saw, the private schools in Argentina are not anything like what we think of here in the States when we think about private school. It was in its own building. It's the parents pay to send their kids there. I believe I was told that the cost per year in Argentinian pesos is around $2,500, or 2,500 pesos, which at the time $1 bought 30 Argentinian pesos, so you would be talking $80 US to send your kids. This was the school that was without power when we first went to it, but the students wore uniforms. Their classes were very standardized. They had more technology. They had access to computers, LCD screens, internet. And the students were very tech savvy with what they used. I thought it was interesting that they combine a lot of community service in with their education at this school. The kids do all of the landscaping. They take care of all of the grounds. They clean the lunchroom afterwards. Basically everything that you do not see in the U.S. schools. Students were very awesome. They welcomed us with open arms, put on some great displays of Argentinian national music, dance, just all around great visit. We went to visit what was called a farm school, and this is a school that was about 30 miles outside of the city. They basically run through 8th grade because this is such a rural agricultural area that these students they're going to stay in agriculture for the rest of their life. So they're trying to teach them skills about farming, cooking, just basically taking care of a home. The public schools, sadly, I did not get to see one in operation. I did get a tour of one, but it was after the students had left. Reminded me of some of what I have seen pictures of with inner city U.S. schools. If there was equipment there, it was behind a cage. There were gates on hallways and things like that so that areas could be closed off. Definitely seemed like they might have some of the same problems that we have when it comes to discipline or discipline and other issues in the school. Finally, the early college, which was very interesting. Now, keep in mind this was only formed in March of this year, so they had their first class in there. And in Argentina, high school is 6 through 12. So there were 6th graders there, but I saw a lot of the same stuff that I would see at any traditional public high school in Davidson County, definitely at our early college here at DCCC, and that's, the teachers having the kids work in groups. They were working on inquiry and problem-based learning. Their access to technology was surprisingly limited, but I guess considering this is their first year. For example, I observed a math class. There were no smart boards, there were no LCD TVs. They had a whiteboard that on wheels that you could move around, and they didn't have calculators. I know here in the U.S. at least we have classroom sets of calculators, but the kids at the early college there were actually using their cell phones as calculators to perform. They were working on fractions the day that I got to interview them, and the activity that they were working with was actually having to do with dominoes, and I took quite a few pictures of that because I thought that was a really great idea, and I wanted to share that with some of our teachers back here. But the early college and the private school far and away were the most similar to what I'm used to seeing in our school system here in Davidson County.
Scott, you shared with me earlier that there was some learning activities outside of the traditional school setting in some of the community centers, and a lot of technology and information shared there. Would you mind sharing with our viewers what you observed in those situations?
So one of the I don't want to call it attractions, but one of the great features of the town was this part of the town center that is kind of its own tech learning center. If you're familiar with Makerspace and what a Makerspace is, this is something that is available free of charge to the entire community. People can come in and design. They can use 3D printers. They can use CAD programs. Everything is available to them, and there are people there to help them use it. So they said that a lot of people come in with, hey, I've got this great idea for product X, and they come in and they design it, and they'll even print a prototype. One of the things that we saw while we were there was somebody had actually created a prosthetic hand that on the 3D printer for somebody who had lost the use of their hand. Not only do they have that there, but they also have a TV studio and a radio station, not skimpy, but full broadcast across the board, and people can come in and do TV programs. They were recording a TV program while we were there that day, kind of a little local news blurb kind of thing, and a couple, the instructor from DCCC that I was there with and our native Spanish speaking student both got interviewed by them while we were there. And they also, as I said, they have a radio broadcast booth. So if, I've got this idea for a radio show that I want to do, I can actually go there and say, hey, here's my idea. I'd like to use this. And as long as it meets certain criteria, and it's not a lot of criteria, to be honest, I can actually reserve time to go in and use the radio broadcast booth and broadcast my own radio show, which, I thought it was really interesting because you can tell that Villa Maria is really trying to position itself as a forward-thinking tech center in Argentina, and that, along with, I think, having the university, the national university there, is going to allow them to do some pretty amazing growth.
As we were talking before the show, you were mentioning that Villa Maria was working actively to get young people involved in the political system and things of that nature in the community. Can you talk to us a little bit more about, I believe you called it the Congress of the Children?
One of the things that I really thought was cool that we got introduced to on our first day tour around the city was they actually have a entire building dedicated to what's referred to the Congress of the Children. And basically what that is they are children under the age of, I believe the ages range from 12 to 18 that are elected by the children of the city to serve on the Congress of the Children. They have a budget. They make decisions on things to do around the city, from improvement, be it landscaping improvements to full-blown improvements for streets, for activities, things like that. And they have the budget and the power to enact these activities, and apparently even some laws. They didn't go into a whole lot of detail. We got about a 10-minute introduction into it, but I thought that was very interesting, because what better way to get young people interested in government and being involved with something, and to get them to actually have some power as young people.
Thanks for sharing your information with us this afternoon, and sitting down with us and sharing with us about Vija Maria and your experiences there. I'm glad you enjoyed your trip, and appreciate all that you do for our kids.